I had attended countless project meetings alongside my father, though this particular meeting marked the end of an era for me. It happened on a Tuesday. As we went over the Granite Creek project schedule, Edmund glanced over, cool and all business, and stated, "Avery, you're not cut out for leadership." My eyes widened, wondering if I had heard him wrong, but he simply continued. Edmund matter-of-factly informed me that 75% of Fletcher and Roan had now been transferred to Jasper Landon, who would take on the managing director role starting next quarter. There was no extra explanation, no heads up, just the same direct delivery he used for something as mundane as ordering lunch. I fixated on the Gantt chart fixed to the wall, half hoping it might offer answers where Edmund had left blanks. My chest felt constricted, yet I kept quiet. I didn't ask for clarification. Deep down, I already knew the reason. Jasper, with his infectious grin and a near-empty schedule, was seen as the visionary, while I was valued mainly for being trustworthy, consistent, and relentless. Nothing more. It felt uninspiring. The rest of that meeting passed in a haze for me. There was some talk about shifting client accounts, a fresh creative strategy, and changes in the budget distribution. I nodded whenever it was expected, and jotted down notes I doubted I'd ever look at again. Once it was over, I returned to my office and shut the door behind me. The buzzing light overhead was almost overwhelming. I sat at my desk, gazing at my faint reflection in the blank computer monitor. 10 years. 10 years of early wake-ups, late nights, missed birthdays, and skipped vacations had all led me to this point. A letdown hidden behind a single phrase. I slid open my lowest drawer and fixed my eyes on the emergency bottle of bourbon I reserved for particularly grueling nights and difficult conversations. My hand hovered above it, not quite willing to grab it. I realized I didn't want to dull what I was feeling. I needed this memory to stay sharp. The words, the moment, the treachery, since my next steps would be up to me. The earliest images I have in my mind are of crawling beneath Edmund Whittaker's drafting table. The scent of sawdust lingered on his jeans while I sat drawing on discarded blueprints. I was able to interpret a floor plan before I ever managed to write a proper sentence. While my peers played make-believe homes, I was busy reorganizing pretend construction zones. At the age of 12, I found myself handling calls at the reception desk. By the time I turned 16, I was trailing my father, Edmund Whittaker, on client site tours, holding a clipboard and posing the kinds of questions he once told me made him proud. "Avery's got the drive and intuition," Edmund would boast. "She finds order in the disorder." I trusted every word he said. I passed on a scholarship to UCLA so I could stay nearby and enroll at San Diego State University, pursued a degree in construction management, and finished at the top of my cohort. I declined 2 job offers from companies on the national stage. Fletcher and Roan was the heritage I insisted belonged to me. Stay here and help it grow, I resolved. And that's exactly what I chose. For a decade, I arrived before anyone else and was always the last to leave. I processed payroll, onboarded new employees, and took charge of all the main contracts after Jasper Landon withdrew from the startup world and needed space to regroup. I kept going through the flu, 2 relationship breakups, and even a flood that almost destroyed our file room. I was reliable, consistent, and barely noticed. Taking vacations became an idea rather than a reality. My weekends faded into endless email marathons. I gave all I had to the company because I hoped that someday it would give something back to me. My own name never appeared on the exterior sign, yet I believed it was engraved in the very base of the company. In the end, I realized I wasn't crafting a legacy at all. I was simply propping up the business until the real boss arrived. And once that finally happened, they handed me the keys I had spent 10 years working toward. Jasper returned from Portland carrying a partly filled duffel and sporting 3 fresh tattoos. His startup had changed direction too late. I tried to brush it off, making failure sound like it was just another line added to a resume that's always growing. My parents, Edmund Whitaker and Vivian Whitaker, greeted him like a returning hero, with the same warmth they might offer to a celebrated veteran or a long-lost son. "He's got vision," Edmund told everyone at Monday's briefing. "He brings new enthusiasm and sees the big picture." There was no mention of the overdue payments or the investors who continued to ring my mother's phone. It was simply a fresh start, disguised by charm and the promise of success. Within 48 hours, he was announced as the new director of strategic growth. There were no clear job responsibilities, no specific tasks, just a glass-walled office, a leather executive chair, and a door plate bearing his name directly opposite mine. In contrast, I was still the one responsible for reviewing subcontractor proposals, drafting safety guidelines, tracking our budget, and inspecting construction sites in my steel-toe boots. Every bill continued to cross my desk for review. Any disgruntled client still dialed my number first. Jasper Landon spent his afternoons brainstorming initiatives. The presentation slides he made looked impressive, filled with industry jargon like disruptive alignment and customer-centric branding. One day, I even saw him search online to figure out what a punch list was. Even so, my father grinned with pride at every off-the-cuff presentation. That, he said, was exactly the sort of ingenuity we required. I held my tongue, kept operations smooth, and quietly picked up after his errors. When a supplier nearly backed out because of a misunderstanding that Nora Powell created, I spent 2 days mending the fallout discreetly. Nobody expressed appreciation. Jasper Landon received recognition in the industry bulletin. My mother remarked that he was finally coming into his own. My father declared he was a born leader. Meanwhile, I remained the project manager holding everything together. I was the support they depended on until the framework was no longer essential. I should have anticipated it, but I failed to, at least, not until the filing cabinet let me down. Everything began with a permit that had vanished. While we were assembling the final paperwork for Martin Hooks, the city inspector, at Hillside Commons, someone had once again placed the zoning approvals in the wrong folder. I made my way to the back filing room alone. Ever since our office manager, Nora Powell, revamped our efficiency protocols, the entire organizational system was upended. The labels were all switched around, folders were misplaced, and some cabinets sat half empty without any clear sense to it. After 30 minutes, I stumbled across a folder sitting in the wrong drawer. Legal confidential internal transfers stared back at me. It wasn't the folder I needed, but my curiosity got the better of me. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach even before I opened the file with my hands. That very first sheet felt like a gut punch. It read, "Transfer of ownership. Fletcher and Roan, effective March 3rd. 75% assigned to Jasper Landon. 25% left in joint control by my father and my mother. My own name was absent. No listing as a shareholder, no place on the board, not even staff recognition. I leafed through all 16 pages, searching for a clause or note to give me some reason, any sort of explanation. But what I found was airtight, intentional, signed and witnessed with finality. I didn't realize Marissa Chen was there until her reflection appeared in the glass behind me. "You're not supposed to be in that drawer," she murmured quietly. My response came out in a breathy, trembling tone. "Did you know?" I asked. She paused, then dropped her gaze to the floor. My father, Edmund Whitaker, had promised to let me know when the moment was right. "Half a year?" I continued, showing her the paperwork. "It's been half a year." Her silence told me all I needed to know. I passed her without a word, clutching the folder as if it were dangerous to touch. I didn't return to my workspace. I left without grabbing my bag or jacket. I simply drove back to my place with the truth riding beside me like a silent observer. And for the first time in a decade, I went to sleep without setting an alarm. Before I even touched the doorknob, the scent of roast chicken welcomed me. That was my mother's way of handling difficult topics. Food first, avoidance later. I entered the house unannounced. Despite the unchanged building and walls, the atmosphere felt off, as though something about it had been quietly rearranged. I adjusted the frame, doing my best to make it appear level, even though I knew it wasn't. Edmund Whittaker sat in his regular chair, glasses perched low, as he leafed through Jasper Landon's newest proposal. Jasper leaned against the kitchen island, nonchalantly drinking wine as if the peaceful unraveling around us didn't matter. My mother, Vivian Whittaker, called out from the stove in a bright, inviting tone. "Perfect timing. Sit down and make yourself comfortable." I gave a nod, set my purse aside, and watched the scene unfold. Jasper plunged straight into his pitch about expanding our digital presence, and Edmund Whittaker responded with approving nods as though he'd just stumbled upon something revolutionary. Fragments like increased market visibility and next-generation branding floated past me before I stopped listening altogether. I bided my time until dessert, until my mother presented the peach pie and my father relaxed and unbuckled his belt as if it were an ordinary Sunday night. Only then did I retrieve the folder from my bag and place it squarely in the middle of the table. Instantly, the room's energy froze. "What's this?" Edmund Whittaker, my father, inquired. "You tell me," I replied. The document had been kept in the legal drawer marked confidential. His gaze fell on the label, and I caught a flash of either shame or perhaps irritation at being discovered. "I was planning to discuss it with you," he said. I kept my tone neutral when I asked, "Would that have been before or after the next newsletter comes out, Avery?" "Avery, you handed over what was rightfully mine without so much as a warning." My mother paused mid-motion, her hand unmoving on the pie server. Jasper's grin faded abruptly. My father carefully set his fork down, as if its heft had somehow shifted unexpectedly. "We believed it was the right move for the company." "No," I replied, sliding the folder in his direction. "You just assumed I'd never leave, no matter what you did." I got up, grabbed my coat, and made my exit before anyone had the chance to speak again. The folder remained on the table. I chose not to come back to work on either Monday or Tuesday. Nobody reached out, not even Marissa Chen. Perhaps they assumed I just needed some time or space. Or maybe they already suspected. When Wednesday arrived, I opened my work email, hoping it would be for the final time. I composed my resignation notice with the careful attention to detail that had consistently earned me compliments for being precise, matter-of-fact, and detached. There was no sentiment, just straightforward reality. As of now, I am leaving my job at Fletcher and Roan. In accordance with my agreement, I will be utilizing my accrued vacation time during my departure period. All future inquiries should be addressed to Jasper Landon. I closed with just my name, Avery, omitting any formal sign-off. Afterward, I activated my automatic email response. "I appreciate your message. I am unavailable going forward. For questions involving any projects, please reach out to Jasper Landon." I lingered quietly for a moment, keeping my gaze on the monitor. After that, I powered down the laptop and tucked it away in my desk. Later that evening, I made my way to the office when it was completely deserted. The parking lot lights threw out long shadows onto the pavement as I moved quietly through the building, almost as if I were visiting an earlier version of myself. I gathered up only the things that belonged to me: my journals, a framed picture of my college dog, and the little potted succulent that had somehow endured 5 years of neglect. I left behind the awards, the office chair I had chosen, and the monitor I had upgraded on my own. I positioned a single note neatly in the center of my desk, right under the Fletcher and Roan plaque. I wrote, "Let your leader handle it." My keys went into a plain envelope labeled HR. There was no signature and no sense of finality. As I exited through the front doors, I didn't glance back, but I was certain someone would start searching for me as soon as things began to unravel. Once the fourth day had passed, the emails began pouring in. Mason Thorne, our junior project coordinator, sent me a forwarded email chain with the subject line, "Current, Oakley expansion invoice rejected." I took my time reading through it. I archived it afterwards. I was no longer the one they relied on to catch them if they fell. The next voicemail was left by Linda Rowe. "Hello, Avery. Apologies for reaching out. Mr. Curtis Palmer hoped I could clarify a few details in the site budget. He mentioned I'd have the answers. Would I mind giving him a call when I got a moment?" There was no moment when I was available. I had finished with that. Rumors started going around before the week was over. The Oakley expansion contract was now in jeopardy. Curtis Palmer was visibly irritated. Staff at the site weren't getting the guidance they needed. Bills remained unpaid and unprocessed. I scheduled a crisis meeting, which dragged on for 4 hours and accomplished nothing. Even after all this, I kept quiet. Anytime a new message arrived, I erased it immediately, each notification a cue that they'd constructed an empire without a designer. I didn't have to undermine anyone. All it took was my inaction. That was the aspect that made it almost artful. It was Curtis who eventually tried my personal phone on Saturday evening. His tone was short, though courteous. "Avery, I've collaborated with your family for nearly 10 years, and this is the only instance I've thought about leaving. You've always been what kept me here. I want to know what's going on." I played the voicemail a second time before silencing my phone. Later that evening, another call came through. My father, Edmund, spoke. "Avery, this has become urgent. Curtis Palmer is threatening to pull the Oakley expansion. Jasper doesn't have a solution. We need you back at the office Monday, please." I never heard the rest of his thought. A click marked the end of the message. No apology, no acceptance of fault, only fear. I chose not to reply. Instead, I powered up my laptop for the first time in days and began mapping out what to do next. Not for their benefit, but for my own. My first step was to review the budgets. A decade of spreadsheets and forecasts, each embedded with my own formulas. Next, I moved on to the project timelines. Gantt charts, delivery schedules, and subcontractor workflows were all systems I had personally built from the ground up. Then came the client dossiers. Not the contracts themselves, but the hidden layers. Personal preferences, challenges, important dates like birthdays, children's names, and the best ways to approach every meeting, information no algorithm could ever truly replicate. By the time the weekend was over, I had compiled 20 pages, a portfolio that captured the ingrained operating knowledge behind Fletcher and Rohn, developed quietly in the background. I titled it Operational Legacy Avery Landon. I made sure not to include any sensitive corporate details, just evidence. Clear, incontrovertible evidence. On Monday morning, I sat down with Wexler Morgan Group, the longtime competitor from across town. Their managing partner, Ruby Lynn, welcomed me as if I had already joined their organization. "We've kept an eye on your accomplishments for years," she remarked while leafing through a printed copy of my summary portfolio. "Honestly, I'm shocked you stayed as long as you did." I didn't respond, nor did I need to. The offer arrived without delay. Executive Director of Operations, complete independence, profit participation, and 4 weeks of mandatory vacation time. I informed her that I would have to consult my attorney before making any decisions. Later that day, I sat down with Sophie Tran, a friend from my undergraduate days who now focused on employment law. We laid out the paperwork on her kitchen counter. She marked certain provisions in red and eliminated ambiguities with blue ink. "This is a strong offer," she assured me. "It's above average and very reasonable." I agreed. In the past, I might have second-guessed myself, hesitant to act, but I was no longer seeking to earn anyone's allegiance. I was finished seeking validation from those who never paid attention. That evening, I sent Sophie Tran an email. I hadn't yet added my signature, but my fingers stayed steady as I wrote, "I'd like to discuss this further over lunch." There was no shock when the doorbell sounded. The moment I heard the second voicemail, I had known to expect it. My father did not bother to knock. He never had before. He waited at my door, shoulders visibly tense, gripping a folder beneath his arm. There was no attempt at friendly conversation, no hint of a grin, just a sense of insistence. "We need you to come back," he said. "Oakley Ventures is threatening to sue. Everyone at Fletcher and Roan is frantic. Jasper's overwhelmed." I moved aside, not out of courtesy, but because I was genuinely interested in hearing his entire proposal. He presented his offer to me like a straightforward transaction. I would receive a salary increase, a higher-ranking title, a corner office, and the position of Chief Operations Officer. On top of that, I would have what was described as complete autonomy, at least according to the paperwork. "We can sign everything by Friday," he continued, as if the previous month hadn't even occurred. "So, you want me to come back and handle the fallout?" I responded, keeping my tone expressionless. "I want you to return to the place you're meant to be." I rested against the countertop, arms crossed. "Okay, these are my terms." He paused, taken aback. "I want 40% ownership, a seat on the board, enforceable voting rights, and a guaranteed maximum of 45 work hours per week, all in a formal agreement. If I'm going to rebuild this, I'm not about to lay my life on the line for it." He looked at me as if I had suddenly started speaking in code. I felt it was deeply unfair. I explained that what truly crossed the line was asking me to manage the business without giving me any real influence. I won't repeat that mistake. I'd put it all on the line just for a figure. I simply shook my head. There was nothing I was jeopardizing here. Was I the one taking the risk now? He didn't push back. Instead, he simply stood there, grappling with a world that no longer conformed to his demands. I told him, "You have 2 days. If you don't decide by then, the Wexler Morgan Group's offer will be finalized." He fell silent, collected his paperwork, and walked toward the exit with the air of someone who realized the stakes had shifted. And for the first time, I was the one dictating the terms. The Riverfront Grill served as our neutral meeting spot, busy enough to keep interactions courteous, yet calm enough for discussing contracts. I arrived exactly at noon. They had already taken their seats. David Franklin, our family attorney, flipped open his leather folder as I took my seat, but I raised a hand to pause him. Before anything began, Jasper Landon said, "Look at me. I need to apologize." He didn't sugarcoat it at all. There were no justifications, only a gentle, sincere voice I hadn't heard from him in a long time. "I'm totally overwhelmed, Avery. You made this seem effortless." I convinced myself I could bluff my way through, but I can't. My mother, with her hands resting in her lap, met my eyes. "We should have brought you in," she admitted. "We assumed you'd get it, but we were mistaken." Then Edmund Whitaker, my father, cleared his throat, the last bastion of resistance in an eroding defense. "I always expected you'd stick around," he murmured. "That was my error." I kept a neutral face and didn't show any reaction. "Here's what I want," I told them. "Transfer 35% ownership from Jasper to me. Grant me an equal vote for every board decision. Set up a joint leadership model. I'll handle operations, he'll take care of creative, and a formal policy, capping executive work weeks at 45 hours, was documented in writing." David Franklin gave a nod and carefully pushed the draft contract in my direction across the table. He confirmed, "These conditions are all detailed right here." I made sure to carefully read through every clause twice. There was no feeling to it, just pure straightforwardness. Once I finished, I picked up the pen and added my signature. Next, Jasper Landon signed, followed by my mother. Lastly, my father completed the signatures. After I set down the pen with its final stroke, a peculiar but peaceful silence settled among us. It didn't feel uneasy. It simply meant closure. Now, we all understood exactly where we stood, and for once, my place carried real significance. Precisely a month afterward, I pushed open the doors at Fletcher and Roan again. This time, I wasn't returning as a backup or someone who patched problems, but as chief operating officer and co-owner. Jasper had already moved into his new office space. My own office had been completely updated. There wasn't a corner view or any sign of status, just a practical private spot that finally belonged to me. I overhauled our weekly operational meetings, clarified our chain of command, and started handing off tasks with purpose. In just under 3 weeks, our clients began receiving much faster responses. Things got better. Our project overruns were slashed by 50%, and employee turnover began to stabilize. We weren't in need of miracles. What we needed were procedures, and someone reliable to enforce them. Jasper, to his credit, focused on his strengths. He flourished in front of our clients, leading presentations, organizing walkthroughs, and nurturing partnerships. He even reached out to me whenever he encountered a knowledge gap. That simple change showed me that things were different now. Instead of working until midnight, I was locking up the office by 5:30. I started going to the gym, returned to restful nights, and finally took a Saturday off for the first time in ages. For a change, I agreed to have dinner with Clark Whitney, the environmental consultant I usually bailed on multiple times each quarter. The atmosphere at board meetings evolved as well. Whenever I contributed, they paid attention, requested my progress reports, and even waited for me to cast my vote. One time, when a meeting wrapped up and everyone else filed out, my father stayed behind. With his gaze still lowered, he spoke the words distinctly. I was always the one taking charge, though it never occurred to me. Somehow, I failed to express my gratitude. All I did was give a slight nod. With that, I gathered up my binder, straightened myself, and walked out, ready to tackle whatever project would come next.